All right. So first to begin with questions to consider regarding differentiation. These are obviously not extensive. As we saw from the research, there are so many different areas that we can um, identify different or various needs with different students, but these are um, main areas either I've come across personally or I thought might be good questions to consider. So I separated them according to several different areas. The first being the background of students. This is probably the largest umbrella term in the document because this really encompasses what kind of background the student's coming from. So it might be their family situation. This is a very broad question because it really talks about do they live with their parents? Do they have siblings, younger or older? What are their parents' respective occupations? How involved are the parents in their education? Of course, we come across a lot of parents who are either pretty lax when it comes to their students' education. They leave it in the hands of the teachers. But of course, there are also those parents that are so in tune with what their children are doing. They want to have one-on-one discussions with the teachers. They want to be aware of every assignment or test that is being given. They want to know exactly where their child is in terms of progress, and that can have various effects on the student. Then there's also the student's racial, ethnical, cultural background. So this also has a large impact on the way that they learn or the perspectives that they have, perhaps any sort of situation or events in the past that have shaped them up until this moment. And of course, certain behaviors in class are also perhaps different depending on which culture you're in. I know that there are some cases, even as an international student myself, where there was some sort of miscommunication because of the differences in culture when it comes to interactions with others or interaction with the teacher. There's also the fact of, is the student new? Because I think that a lot of the times new students tend to struggle adapting to their class or adapting to the school. And that might be misunderstood as their own ability when maybe it just be them overstimulated in a new environment. It might also be that they are from a family that tends to move around a lot, which means that perhaps the student might either lack motivation and truly rooting themselves into the school and in the teaching because they expect that they're going to move again, or perhaps it might be that they're not quite used to long-term engagement or other factors such as that. I think another huge question to consider is what is the student's native language or what is the language that the student is most comfortable using? Because of course, the way that a student learns or processes information might be different if their native language is not the official language of the school. And this might hold them back in certain cases, as well as, especially if it takes them more time to process things, or if perhaps there's just some sort of colloquial language or some sort of phrase that's so in tune with the language that's being instructed, but not necessarily the language that they grew up with. And this can um, Right. So here I was also thinking that this might not just be the student themselves, but also how there might be the whole class. Perhaps this is a teacher teaching at an international school again, and they're teaching in a school in Korea, in China, in somewhere in Europe. And it's just that the whole class themselves needs to be instructed in a specific way because they can't be treated like they were raised in the West or the States. All right, and on to characteristics of the student. So I think one of the major questions that we all came up with in the class in the VC was which kind of learner is the student? Because I think we all recognize that the students learn differently. And this is a another kind of broad question, but in summary, the students might learn differently due to they might do well with visuals, they might do well with video instruction, they might do well with pictures, with diagrams, with um, actually showing them the patterns available. They might do well with auditory learning. Perhaps that has to do with maybe they don't do well with reading books, but they are just fine with the audiobooks. Um, this maybe they learn well verbally when they have to read things out loud, they have to process it them themselves first, logical, physical, any other sorts of learning style that they are more comfortable with, or that the information just clicks faster for them. I think other questions involving the characteristics of student does the student have a medical condition? Sometimes students actually do have medical conditions that either prevent them from learning to the best of their abilities in the same circumstances as other students, and that might be something to pay attention to, and that the teacher should be aware of. Does the student need to move or have trouble standing still? So this could apply both to students who are actually diagnosed with ADHD, students who are suspected of having ADHD, or it's just the fact that a lot of students in general, it's the case that they need to move and they can't sit down for an hour and a half at a time, especially if it's a subject they're maybe not as interested in. Other questions involve what is the student's stress level? So this could be related to their levels of anxiety, their expectations, both on them, both internally as a student, perhaps what types, there are certain students that place a lot of expectations on themselves and a lot of pressure on themselves, and this affects their learning, as well as external pressures, which could be the school, their teachers, their family. The workload in general across various classes. I know that for a lot of my students, every time I ask them, how are you doing? They always answer that they're very stressed, that they have a lot of work. They have so many exams across and so many assignments in different classes. And sometimes I had one student who showed up to class and she's a wonderful student. She tries her best to learn, but she was falling asleep in my class because she's just so exhausted from all the work that she has to do. And also what motivates a student, because a lot of students, their motivation, and I saw in the research in some of the videos, basically this question is also, what does success look like for the student? So not only to show them what success looks like in regards to how we measure success, but also what motivates them to learn more, because I think that's a huge part of their learning process. And existing skill level, I think that all of these questions are very much related. But the major one is, major two actually are, have the students learned the material or the necessary foundations before? So it was mentioned briefly in one of the video materials that it's very important that teachers are aware of how much their students already know, or perhaps don't already know before they start teaching the material. Because if the students are already familiar with certain topics, it is redundant to teach them the same topics, the same methodology again, because the goal is to take what they already know and then to improve that or to go further. And sometimes it's extremely detrimental for students who lack that foundational knowledge, and perhaps the teachers assume they already have that foundation when in fact they don't. And the teachers already proceed to what they expect their grade level, at their grade level they're expected to know already, essentially. And therefore, I think it's important for teachers to be aware of exactly how much the student knows, how much they're familiar with, and how much they're not familiar with, so that they're able to fill in any gaps. And that's the second question, any gaps that the students might have regarding the subject material. 3 and 4 are somewhat related. It's more questioning, is the student particularly gifted for their age level? And does the student require more support for their age level? Because of course we see that in grade levels, despite being in the same age, several students might be particularly gifted, and perhaps this means that they need to either be paired with similarly level students so that the work is more fair and that the students feel like they are being pushed more to their abilities, or perhaps even in some cases be elevated to different grade levels because there's that much of a discrepancy. Similarly, which students need more support than others in their age level so that they are able to be given sufficient help, so that they reach the level that they should be and expect to be at their grade level. Lastly, in the classroom, this is mostly due to social interaction or classroom dynamics. So when it comes to social interaction, does the student gravitate towards working alone or towards working in groups? This is kind of like the introverted and extroverted um, conversation, how certain students feel very, very comfortable working by themselves, and some students feel much more comfortable if they're able to work with other people, if they're able to build off of ideas, work in groups. They're not as confident by themselves. Um, does the student struggle in voicing their opinions? So again, in group situations, in classrooms, does the student have problems in trying to voice their own thoughts, whether that might be because they're shy, they're afraid of being wrong. Perhaps the classroom atmosphere, and I'll get into that a little bit later, is not as welcoming as it should be when it comes to giving your own opinions. And does the student struggle in asking for help? So I think a lot of the times that we try and help these students, and then sometimes there's students that might be overlooked because they, even though maybe they are aware that they need help, they are afraid to ask for help, either for fear of admitting that they lack in anything, that they don't understand anything. And of course, as teachers, we want to be sure that we are encouraging and we give off the sense that students are welcome to voice their concerns with their own learning without fear of kind of punishment or judgment. And lastly, finally, into the last bit here with classroom dynamics, class size doesn't need to be reduced. So surprisingly, class size didn't have as much of an effect according to the research, but I think that unless it's the overall school size, but I think that when it comes to classroom sizes overall, I find that we try to, at the Academy of keep our classes limited in class size. We try not to have more than perhaps 5 students at a time in our courses. If the classroom grows too big, then we split the classes according to teachers and we find different times because we really prioritize individual attention. Both, and of course, instruction for the group, and we want that sort of collaborative aspect, but we also want to ensure that each student is given the attention that they need. So for here, the class size, I think it's also related to question 3. Either the class size itself is smaller, or perhaps we work in groups, or we involve more group activities, or we ensure that there are opportunities where the teacher can spend that more time with the student. Is the classroom a safe space for open discussion and collaboration? This is very relevant to what I was discussing earlier, basically ensuring that the students feel comfortable in the classroom, both with other students and with the teacher, that they don't feel suppressed or oppressed, or that they are unable to, or that they're limited in any way, shape, or form. And finally, how does seating look in the classroom? I think that seating also has quite a large effect on classrooms, because it's very different between the kind of traditional rows, assigned seatings, groups. The U shape tends to be very effective because students are able to see each other and the teacher. I know that in a lot of, and this is more towards my experience and studying history. Of course, sometimes we had that sort of Socratic seminar where there was this circle around teachers. So we had to make sure so that we could really see everyone voice their opinions. There's very much that discussion aspect to the class. So these are some of the questions that I put together with regarding differentiation, how I might approach it, what sort of things to look for.
Okay,
I'd
I
love to hear
totally
your
agree
thoughts.
with you. The seating looks in the classroom because I
Mhm.
also try to let my students sit in a circle and I'm in the middle to tell
Mm,
them some information. Then I can ask another student standing in the middle to share their attitudes. So that's a very
mhm,
good way. But it's not a very I mean, it's not very easy to do
mm,
this kind of ways in the traditional Chinese class because
mhm.
inside China, the mainland China, there's a lot of students inside one classroom, sometimes
Right.
over 40 to 60. So that's quite
Mhm,
difficult. So inside of some public schools,
mhm.
teacher may find another ways to separate them into different kind of groups. But I'm in a training school, so I just have 15 students. I can do this.
Yes.
Okay, so it's my turn. I'm gonna show my PowerPoint. but maybe you should stop yours first and then I
Oh
can
yeah,
share the
sure. Oh,
screen.
of course, of course. All right, so we can go to your PowerPoint and then I can share the case study and then we can go back to your case study.
Case study. Here. Okay, I'm gonna share my teaching diverse students from some 4 parts. The first is the areas of the diversity, and the second is my overall course designs inside the class, and then is how and when to differentiate the instruction, and last is my case study. So we're gonna start it. So here is the different areas of diversity, and just we can't measure everything with a ruler, so nor can we measure every student by a single standard. So here you can see 6 areas of diversity. I think that's much important, very important inside my class. On the bottom, you can see the 3 areas. It's very obvious because children with learning skills will learn more efficiently. Smart children have stronger deliberation and comprehension skills, and children with learning disabilities, such as easy distractions, have a weaker absorption of knowledge. But I mainly want to talk about the differences caused by the above 3 aspects. So first of all is the gender. Okay, I find out girls are more careful than the boys inside the classroom. So girls are more able to capture the details of the teacher's explanation and take notes in time. In addition, girls have a better memory for language, and some girls even remember the words they learned on which page of the book, but boys are relatively easy to forget. So the girls tend to show a higher interest inside the English, because I'm teaching English in a training school, and the boys are more interested in science or math. So that's, I find, the big problems. And you can see here are 3 pictures. The first picture is my student's notes. It's made by a girl, and the notes is very clean. The second is also a girl's homework about the vocabularies, and I asked them to write down the part of the speech and use the vocabulary to make a sentence. And the last picture is a boy's homework. So you can see the girls' homework are better than the boys. So this is these class notes and their homework can also prove this kind of things. And I also checked some information on the internet, and I find out a German psychologist, Stellan, in his book, The Psychology of Difference, believes that in the female brain, the development of the left hemisphere, which represents language, is often better than that of the man. And the development of the right brain, which represents the spatial processing ability. So the man's, this part, logical part, is better than the women. So therefore, the woman's memory ability is stronger in mechanical memory, while men are better at understanding memory. So that's explain how the difference of their homework. Then there is the social status. Here I'm talking about the social status of their parents. Generally, there are 2 situations. The parents who are officials will care more about their children's grades. And so they will, like the first picture shows, they will also always keep an eye on their children, and their children's learning habits will be relatively better under certain pressure. But sometimes the pressure is too much. The child is easy to resist. There will be some irreversible situations, such as the child may be depressed. But the parents are in business, especially rich families, children are more likely to give up when they find some learning problems, and their parents don't have enough time to manage. So children are not serious enough about the learning, but the mentality is very good. Finally, is the children's motivation levels are quite different, which also affect their learning. Uh, there is a child in my class, when she was in elementary school, she felt that the school content was very simple. So she didn't work hard and seldom did homework. When she's in the second year of junior high school, she find out there's a gap between herself and the others. So she secretly made up her mind to rush forward and ask me for extra practices supplements. So the enthusiasm for learning has becoming particularly high, and of course her study have also improved. So the students' motivation are quite important to affect their learning. And then I want to share about some ideas of my overall course design inside the class. In order to attract my students' attention, I will find some video related to the topic of the lessons or some audio as a warm-up before the class. First, let students be interested in the topic, participating inside the class discussions, and then learn the following words and the sentence patterns. Students are easy to lose their attention when they spend a long time inside the class. And I will mark out some important and difficult points to facilitate students to grasp the key points and insisting on focusing on the class. And another way is for some words and the phrase that students are not familiar with. I will give them some pictures or words they have learned before as promotes to get the students to think about and refine vocabularies. So these three ways are I usually use inside the class to catch the students' attention. And for the differentiate instruction, I will plan my teaching schedule from the 4 parts and according to the actual situation of students at different levels, carefully study the curriculum standards and the textbooks, determine specific and visible teaching objectives, and distinguish which belong to the common goals and which are not belong to the common goals, the specific goals. So there should be a gradient in the design of question. So when I design the questions, I will think about what questions are general questions that students can answer it. And maybe some other questions the students can't answer it, I will change it in detailed ways because they can use the sentences and the words to locate the detail. So that's easy for some students to answer it. And I will also encourage, here. Encourage innovation for some junior students. For middle school students, it is mainly to stimulate interest. And for junior students, it is mainly to enhance confidence. There are two types of students' homeworks. I will give for them compulsory and optional. Compulsory homework is for unified for the whole class with uniform standards and requirements. This is a relatively basic question designed according to the basic requirements of the outline and the teaching materials. And the selection of homework mainly refer to the top improvement questions designed according to learning level of excellent students and the middle students. Require excellent students to do it and ask the multiple solutions to one question and encourage the middle students to do it and then ask them to do more than who can do this things better, to let them to compare with each other. And for the below level students, only do the most basic part of the work. So that's for the task parts. Yeah. Yeah. And then is the evaluation. Now this page here. The teacher evaluation can also have a strong positive and negative impact on students in the classroom teaching, marking essays, examinations, and other activities. Teachers should appropriately evaluate students at different levels according to the different standard. We should be good at forming the process of low-level students and prevent complacency among high-level students. Yeah. So I'm just left the last part, the case study of one of my students. I just started from here, and then we can share yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So here is my student case. I work in a training school. So I mainly teach junior high school students grade from 7 to 9. At present, most of my students in the class are in grade 8. And there is a boy in grade 7, only one boy in grade 7, because he's more talented. And the textbook is here. We use the Unlock from Cambridge. At present, my class is using the Unlock 2. So today I mainly analyze one of the students in my class named Jackie. He's a boy. The family economic situation is ordinary, but his mother attaches great importance to English. He's been in institution since he was 3 years old, and he's grown up in our education system. From September to 2021, he entered the middle school, the junior high school, and I began to be his class teacher. But I find that his learning effect was not good enough, even worse than some students who didn't study here since childhood. This is the infographic I submit in activity 1. And I think the student's study has been affected by these aspects: attendance rate, the assignment of homework, learning aims, the visualization, inferences, making connections. These are related to the English reading. So as I said before, his mother takes English very seriously. So he never missed the lessons. So here attendance rate is 100. However, he has difficulty in doing his homework and tends to be distracted. Therefore, his class efficiency is not high and his homework completion rate is not high. As a result, he could not form a closed loop through the practice after class because we mainly learn by reading in the class. We emphasize strategies, the reading strategies, and learn by combining audio and videos. So as you can see, Jackie has a rich imagination, so he can do a good visualization, and he has an advantage in this part. So he has so I always ask some relative questions, maybe show a picture and let him to introduce the information inside picture, or maybe introduce a topic, let he to tell what he think in his mind, because he's good at imagination. But he has a relatively poor ability in making inferences because of his weak vocabularies, unable to paraphrase and summarize the content, and the learning process will not raise questions. In view of his mind wandering, I would make him sit in the first row inside the class
Mm.
and ask him questions about any time to help him return to his attention. I will also require him to take notes and check his notes before he uh, left the school. In view of his visual advantage, I will ask Jackie to describe the picture video information and then ask other students in his group who are good at inferring to supplement the information so they can work all together to complete the task. In the view of his weak summarizing ability, I will give keywords to assist him in his list of questions so he can use the keywords to retell some extent, and then the classmates in the same group will help him to supplement the information. Uh, so after nearly 2 years, Jackie's grades have made obvious progress, and the classroom enthusiasm has also been improved. As for the homework problem, I mainly communicate with his mother and ask her to be a supervisor. If the homework was not finished in time, I will ask him stay inside the classroom after class and then finish it before going home. So that's for the Jackie's case. These are the inferences I use. I'll finish my case. It's your turn.
No, it's great. It's great. It's nice that you can be on top of the homework. I think in the one of the things we struggle with as an academy is that we can't really enforce things on the student as much because we're not their traditional teachers. So the best you can do is encourage them and also ask if it's repetitive enough, ask their parents to push them a little bit. I once had my student hand her last few classes worth of homework in like a packet with a rubber band around it, finally. After I asked her several times.
Can pay much attention on the class, but when he come back home, I can help him. So only his
Right.
parents to support.
Right.
Yeah.
I really liked in your presentation that when you were discussing the different task levels with the tiered students, with the excellent students, the kind of mid and then the low, and sort of were you talking about in the higher levels, were you saying that you're going to make it a kind of open question, that there's multiple answers for discussion, or why would it be more open, the different questions?
The open question for the junior students so they can share much more information. Some basic questions, yes or no questions, maybe I will ask like Jackie to answer it to encourage him.
Yeah, and I agree. It's sometimes the more successful classes are when you put a video at the beginning or some sort of visual stimulus that lets them visualize the topic, and then you can show them. All right, let me
Yeah,
go ahead
they're quite young, so when they watch the video, they feel very exciting.
That's true.
Yeah, they can when they watch a video, they can find a lot of information. But if I ask them to read the paper, oh, so
Right.
bored.
It shuts down. They see the long text sometimes, and it's too much at once.
So usually, I will separate my lesson into three parts. First, 10 minutes, I will let them to watch the video or listen to the audio, and then the next 20 minutes, I will ask them to work in the group to discuss the reading papers because the reading is quite long. So I will separate into different parts and let each group to read one part, and then they can share their informations, so they will not feel much bored.
Right. Sometimes with especially the younger students, the grade 5, if the reading is long, then I have them read it out loud one by one as well, because I think that it allows them to take a small break, still listen and engage, but also kind of practices their pronunciation and articulation as well, which is really helpful. Okay, I'll go ahead and share my case study. So this case study is semi-fictional. Some of the information, because I don't have access to all the information of my students, so it's semi-fictional. It takes bits and pieces that I've seen from multiple students. So a lot of these traits are present in a few of the students that I work with at the moment. So the name, though, is completely fictional, as is the background, but you'll find that a lot of students have a similar background here. Okay, so the student that I'll be referring to is Leon Chung, and also grade 7 by coincidence. I work with grade 5 all the way to grade 12, but a lot of my students at the moment are either in 7th or 8th grade or in 10th or 11th grade. So for student background, Leon is currently a grade 7 student in the class 7C, born and raised in Hong Kong, but until last year has attended a local school. However, the student has taken the entrance exams for an international school this fall and has passed the minimum requirement for entry and has become one of the students there. He has a younger sibling who also joined the school as well. So the purpose of this case study is that Leon is currently struggling in some of his classes and adjusting to being in a new school. The purpose is to provide a comprehensive and personal analysis on his characteristics as a student, as well as perhaps identify some approaches to how we might better support Leon as a student. So some areas of focus, I split, and when it comes to academics, I split according to mathematics and sciences, English and humanities, and then the arts, because in this case for Leon excels in memorization and does well with identification and patterns. So it's worth concluding from his work so far that he is primarily a visual learner. So that knowing that could really help, and the way that he processes thoughts or organizes ideas could really help in the subject areas that he is lacking in or perhaps not as confident in. And that would be English and humanities, also because I mainly teach English and humanities. So the subject that Leon struggles the most with is English, due to both his English abilities, having been in a local school until now, moving to an primarily English language school, and also due to the fact that he's hesitant to do anything that resembles guesswork. Basically, in English class, in a lot of literary analysis, the students feel like they have to guess what the author is thinking or guess what this text means, especially in fictional works. And that can be very challenging for them because it is something that you have to kind of take a leap in the dark. And oftentimes students feel much comfortable if there's one correct answer. But sometimes the case in English is that might not be true. His English language fluency is not as high as the other students and lacks some areas of foundation. He primarily speaks Cantonese at home and with his friends. When it comes to English writing, the units on creative writing and literary analysis are most confusing for him, basically for the same reasons. He is able to identify the techniques learned, but is unable to apply them to further analysis and explanation. Basically, like a lot of students that I come across, he can identify the what and sometimes the how, but it's a little bit more difficult to explain the why of things. And when it comes to the arts, he's shy when it comes to spontaneous personal expression. He tends to stick with replication and imitation in art classes and keeps to himself in the more loud, expressive classes such as drama and music. He has some previous experience at piano, which could be a potential starting point and focus for encouraging creativity and expression. So I think that it might be the case that some students excel in certain subject areas than others, such as Leon, and there are small starting points that perhaps we could work with each student that they already show some experience with or some comfort level with, and we can grow. So for music, if the student, perhaps like Leon, who knows the piano, if they already know something like an instrument, we can use that to kind of foster their creativity because you already have a starting point that exists. Then when it comes to social and emotional skills, so again, class interaction as well, collaborative work. So Leon is reserved when it comes to interacting with other students. He hesitates to voice his opinions openly in class or group discussion. He works efficiently on his own unless the material is a topic he is unfamiliar with. He hesitates to ask for help from both the teacher and his fellow students. With collaborative work, he carries his work well, but when it comes to group work, but he doesn't really take initiative. So this might be due to hesitancy to supply answers that he's not confident in. With regard to physical challenges, as in the case with a lot of young students, he struggles with keeping still. So this is especially the case if the material is not stimulating or relevant to his interests. He is not diagnosed, however, with ADHD. So this was a general overview with his academics, his social emotional skills, his physical challenges, and I have a few suggestions to provide support. Overall, he's a good student who lacks confidence in certain areas. Several strategies to help provide that support could include one, working in more activities that suit his learning style. So having identified that his learning style is visual learning, in subject areas he's unfamiliar with, we could supply supplementary videos on specific topics to really help stimulate his interest, stimulate his learning, help him understand in the ways that he's more familiar with. Two, providing foundational knowledge that is lacking. So again, any sort of areas that he doesn't have the foundation, the same foundation as other students have, such as English language, supplementary materials like the videos mentioned before, or even just extra assignments or tasks that are non-graded. So it's not to add any sort of additional stress on the student, but instead to help give support where it is due. Pairing him with students with similar interests and to help stimulate collaborative skills. Encouraging guesses or mistakes, again, creating that safe space where it is okay to be wrong when you say something, and then both encourage them to guess, and even if it's incorrect, make sure that they don't feel ashamed in front of others, or that they don't feel like they are not as bright or they don't have the potential. We want to make sure that they are aware of that they can learn and that they are free to make guesses that even could be completely off the mark. Creating opportunities for feedback and reflection. I think a lot of the times students sometimes they are aware where they are as a student, and sometimes they aren't. And it's good to kind of have that consistent feedback with things that they like more, appreciate more, are familiar with, but also let them know in the areas that perhaps they are lacking in, need more work in, need more support in. And lastly, providing more opportunities for activities involving movement or hands-on learning. So especially for students that need to move around, try to see how we can incorporate hands-on learning and physical activity into the class at intervals to make sure that students like Leon in this case, and also other students who likely have a similar situation, can still maintain interest, but also be able to not have to sit down for ages. And that's my overall case study.
As you said, now a lot of articles, and no matter in the exam or when they read the papers or the books, there are a lot of articles, they are nonfiction. And some articles are contains different kind of subjects, math, English, music, the literacy. So I always when I plan the lessons, I learned a lot from the students and for preparing the lessons. So I think our job are quite some there are a lot of similarities between our case and between our job. So I'm training school, maybe not not good enough like the public school, but I think there are some better ways we can use. We are not locked inside the teaching materials. We can try different kind of ways. That's a very good chance for the students. Yeah, we'll finish it. It's nearly